Imagine a country with incredible wealth, massive mineral deposits, and decades of uninterrupted peace. Yet a third of its people are waking up every day in poverty. Welcome to this explainer where we are going to dive right into the deeply complex, absolutely fascinating paradox of the Central African nation of Gabon. It's a place of incredible extremes. We're talking lush equatorial rainforests, immense natural resources, and a level of political stability that is incredibly rare in the region. But just beneath the surface, there's a deeply intertwined story of wealth, power, and a seriously looming economic ticking clock.
$10,650. Now that is Gabon's gross national income per capita. To put that into perspective for you, the average for sub-Saharan Africa is closer to just $1,600. So we're talking about a massive gap. This number makes Gabon one of the wealthiest nations in continental Africa, literally second only to Equatorial Guinea. So looking at it purely on paper, this is a highly prosperous country.
But as we know, numbers on a page don't always tell the whole story. Step outside the wealthy enclaves and you hit a starkly different reality. Nearly a third of the population is living below the poverty line, and 1 in 5 people are unemployed. It's a pretty harsh reminder that those top-level economic averages rarely reflect the day-to-day human experience. The wealth is undeniably there, for sure, but it is deeply, deeply uneven.
So you really have to ask yourself, how does a nation blessed with such immense riches end up with so much widespread poverty? To solve this puzzle, we have to rewind the clock and look at exactly how Gabon's wealth has been managed and extracted over the centuries. This isn't a new problem. It's a story that's been building for a very long time. That brings us to our first section, from colony to independence. Let's look at the historical foundation of this nation and see how the theme of extraction got baked right into its very DNA. The timeline really kicks off in 1472, when Portuguese explorers first sailed into the estuary. They actually named it Gabon because they thought the shape of the water resembled a hanging cloak. Over the next couple of centuries, the European presence just kept growing, but it was the French who ultimately claimed sovereignty back in 1885. Holding tight control until a highly orchestrated decolonization process finally led to independence on August 17, 1960. And throughout all these different eras, the primary focus of those foreign powers remained incredibly consistent: extraction. It was essentially a revolving door of resources. It started with the tragic slave trade in the 18th century, largely supplying planters in Saint-Domingue. Then it transitioned to vast ivory and timber monopolies in the 19th century, and eventually to the discovery of massive oil and mineral reserves in the mid-20th century. You see, the actors changed, but the extractive nature of the economy, that didn't budge an inch. Which leads us perfectly into our next era, the Bongo dynasty. After a very brief initial presidency under Leon Mba, this highly extractive economy was inherited and managed by one family for over half a century. Now, Omar Bongo, who took over in 1967 and later his son Ali Bongo, maintained an iron grip on power by embracing a system known as Francafrique. If you aren't familiar, think of it as a sort of neo-colonial handshake. France got a highly lucrative, steady supply of Gabon's oil, uranium, and other raw exports. In exchange, Paris provided the Bongo regime with security troops, financial backing, and the political muscle they needed to build a rentier state. Now, to be fair, this tight control did spare Gabon from the devastating civil wars, famines, and epidemics that unfortunately plagued a lot of its neighbors. But that stability came with a massive price tag. Behind the peace was a single-party autocracy that relied heavily on severe repression. We're talking arrested activists, exiled political opponents. It was peace, sure, but it was peace built inside a pressure cooker. Okay, let's move on to an economy built on oil. We need to dive into the financial engine that allowed this regime to fund massive public works, weather political storms, and, well, enrich a select few. Ever since some major discoveries off the coast of Port Gentil, fossil fuels have completely swallowed Gabon's economy whole. Today, oil and gas account for a staggering 85% of total exports. That single sector funds over half of the entire government's operations, leaving just a tiny sliver of 15% for timber and manganese. Talk about putting all your eggs in one barrel. But relying on a single, highly volatile commodity like that is literally playing with fire. Look at the data here. In the 1970s, surging oil prices sparked a massive boom. Revenues skyrocketed from $68 million to $475 million in just a few short years. They used that to fund ultra-ambitious projects like the Trans-Gabon Railway. But when international prices inevitably collapsed around 2015, total exports plummeted by 29%. This triggered a severe domestic financial crisis, and by 2019, public debt had skyrocketed to over 1,640 billion CFA francs. The music had officially stopped.
And that forces us to ask a deeply urgent question. We know Gabon's oil reserves are depleting. The boom days are well behind them now. So, what happens to this nation's survival in a post-extractive era? Where exactly is the wealth going to come from next?
Finding an alternative to oil brings us to our next focus, protecting the green heart. This takes us to Gabon's other great, and honestly arguably more vital treasure, its lush equatorial rainforests, which cover an astounding 70% of the entire territory.
These incredible ecosystems act as global carbon sinks and provide a crucial climatic refuge for species like the western lowland gorilla. These forests aren't just local treasures, they are literally a vital buffer for the entire planet. But as you might guess, they're under immense threat. We're seeing rapid infrastructure development, like that 300-kilometer Gabonese railway, fragmenting habitats, along with extensive logging, mining expansion, and increased poaching. Plus, this relentless drive to extract timber and minerals has frequently led to the marginalization of indigenous forest peoples, whose traditional land rights get completely overlooked.
It really highlights a profound modern dilemma. As one researcher bluntly puts it right here, expectations based on social justice, equity, and sustainability often clash with the visions and practices of elites. It really hits the nail on the head. How do you balance the preservation of ancestral lands and genuine sustainable development with the massive immediate profits generated by foreign resource concessions? It's a huge challenge.
And that brings us to the pivotal crossroads in our final section, Gabon's uncertain future. Because to avoid total economic collapse as the oil dries up, Gabon desperately needs a new growth paradigm.
Making a successful transition away from an extractive economy is going to require three massive leaps. First, agricultural development. Gabon actually has huge areas of arable land, and they need to build commercial food chains to become self-sufficient. Second, ecotourism. They have an incredible opportunity to draw global tourists to spectacular places like Luongo National Park. And third, infrastructure expansion. But not just for resource extraction, we're talking about providing things like mass transport to reduce rampant congestion in the capital, Libreville, and improving roads to foster a much wider, healthier economy.
The good news in all of this is that the nation's leadership clearly knows a shift is mandatory. Initiatives like Gabon Vert or Green Gabon, launched back in 2016, aim to place environmental preservation right at the core of economic development. The goal there is to diversify exports, protect those vital rainforests, and begin properly integrating the rights of indigenous populations into the national strategy.
But the clock is ticking. As Gabon stands at this critical juncture, caught between a deep-rooted extractive history and the incredibly urgent need for a sustainable future, we have to wonder, can it rewrite its own destiny? Can Gabon actually diversify its economy, empower its citizens, and protect its green heart before the oil era entirely comes to an end? That is the ultimate paradox they've got to solve. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this helped unpack the fascinating complexities of Gabon. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.